Welcome to this week's Feel Good Friday. And I'm trying something a little bit different this week. This week we're doing a full in-depth recovery story. And this is with Claire Jones, who was the former Royal Harpist to Prince Charles. And some of you would have seen she's featured in the Optimum Health Clinic documentary film. But in this interview, which was, I think, filmed before we filmed that, we get her kind of more in-depth story. And I think she was a little bit fresher in her kind of having just come out of fatigue, chronic fatigue at this point. So it's a bit longer than some of the kind of normal Friday sessions, but I think you're going to really enjoy this. It's a really great story of showing not just the kind of healing power of commitment to the healing path, but also how to process that kind of loss and devastation of not being able to do what it is that you love. So Claire's is an amazing story, and here it is for Feel Good Friday. Welcome to Secrets to Recovery Live. My guest in the studio today is Claire Jones, and many of you will have seen from our newsletter and Facebook that Claire is a concert harpist and also the former Royal Harpist, and we'll talk a little bit about that in today's interview, but has had a particularly fascinating journey in terms of her own experience with ME chronic fatigue and also recovery. And I think many of you watching this are obviously patients or hopefully prospective patients of the Optimum Health Clinic. And you probably have a bit of a sense of that pushing pattern, that achiever pattern. And I think part of what's going to be fascinating about Claire is seeing someone get to the point that they're really achieving all the things that they have dreamed of, and then health falling apart and potentially getting in the way of that. But then also coming through, and what that looks like on the other side with recovery. So there's lots of things that will come into today. But firstly, Claire, thank you for being here.
It's a pleasure.
And also thank you for your kind of more general kind of support in terms of what we're doing. I should say that you've got a new album that comes out on Sunday, I believe it is. And there's a concert happening in a couple of weeks or so, which I know you guys are donating some proceeds to the charity, which we appreciate. So thank you for that.
Oh, absolute pleasure.
But there's a lot we could talk about here. And I think maybe the starting point is, when did you first get symptoms or get a sign that something wasn't right? You were saying just off camera that at 16 you had shingles. That's perhaps a kind of start point.
I think if I look back at the history of even going from the childhood era really into teens, I was the type of person that would pretty much do everything I could. Music was a huge, huge part of my life. I played piano, violin and harp, did all my grade 8s and got my distinctions on those when I was 13.
Oh my
I
God.
would end up kind of,
you really were an achiever from a young age.
I was, extremely. I came from a household that was very hard-working, extremely supportive parents, fantastic upbringing in the country in Pembrokeshire. So I couldn't have asked for better, really, in that sense. And when it came down to, though, my passion, music was it from a very, very early age. And so I think I got consumed by it, and I realized that obviously I had a some sort of talent anyway. Sure. At that point, people were telling me, well, your gift is obviously music. And my confidence nurtured along the way, and I, at the age of 14, decided that was exactly what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a soloist. I thought at the time it was going to be violin, but I carried on. And at the age of 16, by that time I was doing pretty much a bit of everything. I was in orchestras, I was accompanying on the piano, choirs in Wales. It's very, very traditional in Wales to do that. And the harp, I was competing, and then juggling all of that with schoolwork. So, of course, as you can imagine, it was quite heavy.
So after every school day, there was concerts or rehearsals, and then there was homework.
I'd be up at 6 a.m. practicing for a couple of hours before going to school.
Wow.
But, I managed to juggle it all, and I managed to do well in my A-levels and different things. But there came a point in that time when I was in the sixth form, 16, 17 years of age, and the crack started to show at that point, I think, because I did have shingles, and I was off then for about 6 weeks off school, missing everything.
And what was that like at that point? I mean, being super busy the whole time and then just
was that okay, or was it just
Yeah, I think at the time, and when you're young, you kind of think, well, this is kind of normal, really.
daytime
I've never really known any different,
Yeah.
really, to be honest. And you sort of just go by what you know, really,
Yeah,
and what you've seen
sure.
and what you do. So at the point, I knew I was busy, but I just thought it was quite normal.
Yeah.
So that time was taken off, but I never had any idea at that point anything else might resurface
Sure.
later on in my life. So when it came to it, I got back to full health and I carried on, and I auditioned for music college, went to the Royal College of Music in London, then I went to the Royal Academy of Music to do my masters. And in that first year of college, I decided actually I was going to change, because I auditioned on violin to get into college. So as you can imagine, physically playing the violin is quite awkward, really. You're
Yeah.
kind of bending over.
Yeah.
Physically, it's quite a challenging instrument. Repetitive strains as well on the
Yes.
body. And then I changed actually to the harp, because my teacher suggested maybe I should, because everybody was asking me to play the harp. Of course, there aren't as many harpists as violinists.
Sure.
In the college. So I then began to sort of really place my dream really in my mind. I think that's when it happened, the second year of college, 19 years of age. So the point came where the Prince of Wales has a for youngsters, young harpists, basically. And it's there to nurture talent and to give somebody a springboard.
Mm-hmm.
And so the position came about, and there was a vacancy coming up in the last year of my college year in
Mm-hmm.
London. So I decided that was my dream, really. That
Yeah.
was really the biggest goal in life, really. I
Sure.
wanted to really achieve that. And very fortunately, so I was 19, and I managed to get the position with the Prince of Wales. And
Wow.
so I auditioned.
When you were how old?
I was then 21,
Wow.
22 at that point. And I was just about to go to do my master's in the academy at the same time for 2 years. So it was quite a busy time in life, because I obviously the dream was there. My achiever patterns were running at an all-time high. My perfectionist traits were really kicking in.
Yeah.
And so, but it was amazing, because I just really wanted to go for this. And I managed to do like an audition for a panel, first of all, at Clarence House, of quite high-powered people.
Sure.
And then I had to do a private audition for the Prince of Wales, where he stood literally right there in front of the pillar of the harp whilst I was playing, So no pressure, but, pretty intimate experience.
Yeah, wow.
A really memorable one. But my life just changed dramatically.
Yes.
Like all of a sudden there was profile, people were wanting me to play, wanted to know why I'd been appointed.
Yes.
I was playing this magnificent gold harp of his that he has in Clarence House. I got to play over 180 times for the royal family,
Wow,
all
that's
in all.
incredible. Wow.
And some of those occasions were one-to-one for the Queen. So the Queen would come in, she'd sit where you are there. I'd sit with my harp and I'd perform for her and do a short programme.
Wow.
I played at the Millennium Stadium in Cardiff for 75,000 people for the Welsh rugby team. I, did all sorts
I
of
won't
different...
ask which one you enjoyed the most.
Oh, well, Indeed. And also I arranged some very big events for the Prince of Wales. I'd also have to sort of present in front of the Prince of Wales as well in dinners, where he'd hand over to me after his charity dinners, and he'd ask me to entertain his guests for 20 minutes or so. I'd present a programme. So they're quite high-pressured kind of times that at that point felt quite normal.
I was going to say, were there signs of symptoms, or you were just riding the wave of your dream, I guess?
I was at the point riding the wave.
Yeah.
I was going from one thing to another, and I was feeling that my dreams were all coming true. And
Yes.
I felt, this is my time. I'm invincible. Nothing will touch me. I'll
Yeah.
be fine, and you sort of feel the world's your oyster, really.
Sure.
And it was for a short time. Start to then get a few cracks which appeared probably around the age of 23, 24, where I started to get periods of fatigue. And at the time, I thought the fatigue was quite normal, maybe. I just thought, well, I'm bound to be tired after things, but I should be able to cope with it. I'll just carry on.
I guess whereas if you hadn't had the achiever pattern, you may have gone, wow, that's really interesting. My body's tired. But if you have an achiever pattern, I guess was that seen as a weakness, or you were just fixated on what you were doing, I guess?
To be completely honest, I think I saw that as being something I wanted to brush aside.
Yes.
I didn't want to listen.
Yes.
My mind was so set on what I wanted to do and how much I wanted to achieve within this time I had the Royal Post. And it's nothing, of course, there's nothing personal to do with the post. It just happened to it was something that gave me a chance to do things. And
it was your dream, and you were passionate about it. I
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you sort of want to make the most of it, really,
Sure.
when you're doing it. So there were those times as well. So there was one or two occasions where I had small burnouts where possibly I'd have to take maybe a week or two off and just rest. And then, but immediately, of course, there'd be something else that I'd booked in, a project or a performance where I couldn't miss, or I felt I couldn't miss.
I understand.
And so I had to go back on stage, not really fully recovered or feeling recuperated, really. So during that time, it was a really funny sort of balance, really, because I was getting these little signs, but also there was so much happening, which was, really keeping me on such a high, really. And the adrenaline obviously was pumping.
Yeah, sure.
So,
so what was the point where it became clear that it was more than just something that you could brush aside, in a sense?
Well, it slowly increased. I finished the position with the Prince of Wales, and then I fortunately got to play at the Royal Wedding for Prince William and Catherine Middleton. And that was a point where there was so much going on press-wise. I appeared on over 1,000 TV and radio networks worldwide.
Oh my God.
One of those networks, for example, ABC America, that's 500 million people, where I had to do interviews and perform live and things. So they're quite high-pressured, but I took it all in my stride.
Yes.
But then there came the record deal with Classic FM, Go with the Golden Harp, which got to number 3 in the charts. I got married to my husband, Chris. So this all happened within, a very short period of about 2 or 3 years.
Yes.
And that was the point where the symptoms were really starting to gather. I was getting lots of headaches, which I thought, again, were quite normal, I thought. Digestive problems started to occur, but I didn't really pay it much attention. And then came the pain.
That as a harpist is something you can't ignore in the same way.
That was the biggest point where I started to really pay attention, was when the pain started to come on, because the pain was throughout the whole of my body. I mean, every inch pretty much. And my muscles just were so sore and they were burning, and I'd get shooting pains and different sort of things. And I just had no clue what was going on.
And it sounds like a disproportionate pain to anything you were doing, and not just a kind of repetitive strain, but a just muscular pain that was unexplained in a sense.
But that was also another little thing, because I obviously, as you said before, it's a physical instrument. I'm holding my arms up and my shoulders up like this. I was doing 5 hours a day at college when I was practicing. So my body had been through a lot, really, throughout those years, and possibly I hadn't done enough to maybe counteract what was going on, the strains I was having. So I sort of thought, it's probably down to the playing, that's what's going on. But it got just worse and worse and worse. And I came back from a tour in America, because I was touring a lot in Brazil and America and Hong Kong and different places. I was doing silly things. I was getting on a plane one day to Hong Kong. I was doing the concert the next day, stepping off the plane, doing the concert, and then stepping back on the plane straight after doing the concert, coming back to the UK, and then doing another performance in the UK. I was squeezing things in, just because I couldn't say no, because I thought this was a time that it was all happening for me,
And you felt invincible. I understand. I think a lot of people watching this will understand that feeling where you just feel like you're superhuman.
Yeah,
and you don't want to see or hear anything that contradicts that, because then it would start to challenge the whole structure in a sense.
Yeah, and I think I thought, to be sort of at the top of my game, really. I wanted to give it everything I could, and to be successful, and to hopefully live a comfortable way of life. I thought I needed to input as many hours, not just practice, but it's not just the playing when it comes to conducting a career in music. It's all about the team you've got around you, your management, your PR, your PA, or whoever they are. You've got to be steering the ship, really.
Totally,
so it's a business. So it's hard to step away from it, because it's a big part of your identity, really.
And I guess also, not that I'm saying something in your situation, but if you'd been in a situation where you didn't have the right people around you, also their livelihood's dependent upon putting pressure, and you can have very good people putting a lot of pressure on someone, because that's their own, and I know many people again watching this have been in situations where they don't want to let people down.
No.
And that's, we talk about the achiever side, but there's also that kind of helper side of wanting to take care of everyone else's needs and your needs not getting a real look in.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said about, not letting people down, because the worst point happened in the illness I know the date, May 22nd, 2013, where basically it had climaxed so much, I couldn't control the pain with any painkillers in the pharmacy that you would get. I'd phoned various doctors, and I just really didn't get much sense, really, to be honest. I couldn't even see anyone. I completely understand the NHS are completely overwhelmed with the amount of people, especially in London, that you see, and I suppose they might have thought I was on the young side, so I'd probably get over it or whatever. But when it came to it, Chris, my husband, had to take me into hospital in the end. And when I went into A&E, I had a seizure, and that's the point where everything changed. The doctors paid a lot of attention to what was going on. They ran all these different tests. Not that they found much, but they tried to run different things. And sort of in a way, fortunately, the consultant that signed me off and mentioned the words, it's chronic fatigue, he said to me at the end of my time at the hospital. He then steered us in the direction of thinking, that's possibly what it is. That's what's happened.
Yes.
So,
and how was that for you to hear that at that point?
I think I was so out of it, it didn't really sink in, because I was in so much pain. They'd put me on a lot of painkillers, and just basically all I could do was sleep, pretty much. The heartbreaking thing was really for my family, because I sort of felt very much for them, because obviously Chris had seen it all happen, and that obviously scared him so much. And to see somebody who's close to you, he keeps saying, you were so on cloud 9 every moment of the day, and, you were living such an amazing life, and different things were happening, and then boom, it just went, everything.
And of course, I know with hindsight, you guys can see that the different warning signs, but when you don't know what to look for and you're just focused on what you're doing, it's like, there's almost an inevitability to what happens. But so that a diagnosis, and initially you were just kind of someone out of it, is you started to kind of let the diagnosis sink in somewhat. What was that like? And did you have to cancel concerts, or?
That was a bit I was coming on to about letting people down, because my biggest trait is, I would always put everybody else before me, and that's the type of person I am. I'm very creative in the way I am, but also I love to see smiles on faces. I love to perform and see their eyes and see how they react, and the buzz it gives people. And I love to give, basically. And that's what I do as a performer, is give constantly on stage, and it gets to a point where you can't give any more. You have to be nourishing yourself and giving your body even more, TLC really, to kind of be able to give more again. And so when the point came, my mum and dad and Chris decided I needed to move back from our home in London back to Pembrokeshire in Wales to live with them for a few months. And we didn't know that at the time it was going to be a few months, but it ended up being 3 or 4 months. And Chris, because we needed obviously for money to keep coming in, he needed to keep working, so he was back and forth from London every weekend. And so because I needed care, I needed full-time care, I just needed somebody there to get me out of bed, to be able to just make food for me, try and help me to eat. Even, bathing myself was a challenge, as it gets to that point, where...
And I'm wondering what that was like, having gone from being Superwoman, in a sense, to having to be like a child, in a sense, taken care of by your parents. I mean, I know a lot of people really struggle with going from being so independent, almost kind of ultra independent, to actually having no choice but to let others take care. And
I think it was psychologically very, very difficult to sort of move from that state to then having to, it was almost like going back to being a child again. But gosh, was I so thankful they were there to look after me, because,
I get it.
And Chris did obviously as well, but there's certain pressures, as there are, aren't there, to sort of...
No, I get it.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, I know. And when it came to the point of having to cancel the concerts, that I had to cancel stuff in Moscow, Abu Dhabi, in Britain, having to tell people and overhear the conversations on the phone between my family and filters or and the fixes, and them trying to explain, because obviously at the time you weren't 100% sure, that's what the consultant had said, but you don't want to say that out loud yet, because you're not, you sort of want
it's true in a sense.
Well, exactly. And so it was trying to explain that I'd gone through something and I couldn't really perform, and so I had to just have the rest. And I think it took a while for my brain to realize, actually, I need to slow down and give my body some time to just rest, because my mind was constantly in the cycle of, okay, so what's the next goal? What's the next thing? Okay, we're on to that next. And I'm planning 10 years ahead all of a sudden, and I'm not even there yet.
And then again, you're totally overwhelmed by the pressure and everything that comes with that.
Precisely. And my body just could not keep up with that sort of pace of life. And why should it have to?
Sure.
I mean, so I needed to break that cycle of, constantly the communication between mind and body, really, as the clinic cleverly teaches us about,
Was there a point of relief that came in at any point? Or was it just a kind of sense of, I've got this new challenge that I have to face? I mean, when you kind of accepted that you couldn't keep going.
I completely, The minute you said that now, the first moment, I remember feeling a little bit of relief was, I think, a couple of weeks in, where I was at my parents', and I sort of thought, okay, I can just actually try and get back to feeling a bit more normal now. And, I knew the diary was empty now for a little while, even though that was scary, because I'd never had to live with that before.
I understand. That was far more stressful than running around. Right?
Yeah, the controlling side of me didn't like that. But
I get it.
But, or being in control, But when it came to a point, there was a relief of, my body was just so happy just to have some time to sort of get back and feel nourished. I slept for ages, as I know you did a lot as well.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that, we talk about 3 different stages of recovery, and you actually let yourself, I know you were forced initially, and ultimately you let yourself, though, go into stage 1, which is you let yourself have a proper crash. Because some people fight that. Well, I mean, you got to the point, I guess you couldn't fight it anymore, but the body needs to have that time initially of just quality healing and rest. But I think what's really great is once you got what you needed, you were able to let yourself have that, rather than still trying to go back too quickly. You let yourself take that time.
I think so, initially that time was there, but slowly but surely my mind was catching up. It was sort of like, well, we sort of need to be looking at, when am I going to come? And the problem was as well, I was getting all the thoughts of, will I ever play again? Will I ever come back from this?
Because I'd heard... That must have been really tough to...
Yeah, it was really dark. It was really tough. I mean, I never felt... in my particular case, I didn't feel low with it. I didn't feel... Of course, you feel low spirit, but you don't feel depressed. I didn't feel like...
There's a big difference between ME and depression. They're both real things. They're just different things.
Very different things. And... depression, but I did feel major anxiety, huge anxiety, enough to sort of make me feel worried about going outdoors, or sort of, because my sensitivity to stress, I suppose, has gone so high, as it goes to such a point that, you're worried about everything. Of course you're worried, because you're thinking, well, this is the love of my life. I love playing the harp. That's what
you spent your entire life building up to the pinnacle, and then suddenly you feel like you're falling off it.
And, I felt so strongly, from the bottom of my heart that God to play the harp, and to sort of, to speak through my music, really. And, when you feel like that, this thing when it gets taken away from you, because you just think the end of the world has come, So from that point on, I did, a few months in, then start to slowly see some signs of feeling a little bit stronger in myself. I could actually, I could walk around the house a little bit then. And luckily, my mum found the link then to the clinic. So we'd been thinking, for that first stage, I don't think it quite sunk in. But then we were thinking about what the consultant had said, and we looked up online, and she found you. And so all of a sudden, then things started to make so much sense when I started to listen to the DVDs that you have, and it was just summing me up to a complete T. It was all reflective of what I'd had, pretty much. I mean, I've got to say, my journey has been, of course, shorter than a lot of other people. I mean, I think, there's been so many people, unfortunately, they've had it for so much longer.
Sure.
But you still feel it the same, and you still feel the same.
That's absolutely right. And it's not a competition, No. It's like a week, a day is too long to be going through it. And some people, very sadly, can spend decades and some years and some months, but it's still the same it may be a very, there's many different versions of ME chronic fatigue in different people. Felt sense is very similar, especially when you feel like your life is being taken away from you in a sense. You started to look at things from the clinic. I know some other things you also looked at as well.
Yeah.
What were some of the things that started to make a difference for you? What helped you?
Well, I think looking at my lifestyle, I think first of all, looking at what makes sense really and what's kind of a bit more sensible really and acceptable really to be doing. What I thought was normal is really not normal.
So you kind of had a bit of a kind of checking, a kind of reassessment kind of around that.
Yeah, exactly. I think I was expecting a lot of myself and, learning about my personality really, pointing things out a bit more to me, things I'd taken for granted, the way you think and the way you live your life is what you've always known really. Right. You sort of find a way of being in the world, don't you? And really to have read everything, it's sort of all of a sudden made a lot of sense. And I started to sort of what bits in my personality I could maybe just rein in a little bit, and
really?
just calm it down a little bit, no need, Rome wasn't built in a day sort of thing.
And was that difficult? I mean, kind of, sometimes because sometimes it's like we recognize we have this achiever pattern and we can see that, okay, there are ways that it's kind of unhealthy, but it's like, if I don't approach the world like that, then will I not be me or will I not be successful? And that can be very difficult.
Yeah, because it was the only way I'd known. It's the only way I'd known to live and to sort of progress in my career in that way and as a person to sort of develop really. So you rely on it. It's a default setting and, as the clinic will teach you, it's just all about what's automatic to you at the time. And all of a sudden, wow, actually, there's another way to live. I don't have to be like that. I can actually stop magnifying that side of my life and just kind of calm down a little bit, but approach it in a different way. And so that's exactly what I tried to do really very quickly, to try and rewire things a little bit so that I wouldn't think quite so aggressively about things, I'd say, right, that's the goal. I know how to get there. So it's just like, and then it would happen usually. So you rely on what you know, really, don't you? So it was really useful for me to be able to just, step back from things. And all of a sudden then, obviously realizing I needed to get from the stress state down to being in a healing state.
And was that something that you found easy or difficult or...
I would say it took me quite a while to come down. I think
I'm
probably,
not surprised given you'd spent so many years wiring yourself up.
So many years, and also living on adrenaline, going from a concert to a concert. It's very draining. So so I would say a good couple of months to come down from where I was. But my family were really, really supportive in trying to help me to remember, to remind me about these things and to remember. And the yoga and the meditation all of a sudden made a lot of sense. I'll be completely honest. Before I thought, not for me, really. No, I don't think so. I'm not sure about that. But oh my gosh, doesn't half help. It was amazing. It's been so amazing. And even now, if I'm having a bit of a busy day, even if it's in the car or whatever it is, I'll just do deep breaths. And actually, that is enough at the moment to bring me down quite quickly, Yeah,
well, that's the thing. It's like once you've trained your system and you've got the kind of skill, it becomes so much easier. What takes like months to do is something that you can get relatively quickly.
Yeah, it seemed like forever at the beginning, didn't
I
it?
get it.
Yeah.
I think it is like forever at the beginning.
It does. And, but I was doing it with the DVD and everything and, so, but, at that point, as everybody will know, you'll do anything to get better, totally. Just anything and everything. And I tried a lot of different things like Reiki and lots of different methods. But for me, in particular, obviously the work with the clinic and looking at a little bit of my nutrition as well, going gluten-free, dairy-free, that was kind of quite good for me, just to cleanse my system a bit and ease things off my digestive system.
And you're also seeing a chiropractor, you mentioned to me earlier.
Yeah, I've got to say, on the physical side, I saw a chiropractor in Cardiff Bay. And a friend of mine had recommended him to me quite a while before that, actually. I just never got round to going to see him.
You're too busy, right?
Yeah. So I decided, right, this would be the time, even though it was quite a trek to go to Cardiff. And I thought, well, there's lots of things I've got to get over first to get in the in with and be able to go down.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like when you're that kind of affected by chronic fatigue, just getting to medical appointments is a huge stress of its own.
Absolutely, that's the thing. You know, that's what's so great about the clinic, really, because you can do it online, and so that was so much better at the beginning, at that stage. But then a little bit after, about maybe a month or two after I started with the clinic, I gained a little bit more strength, and Chris would take me to the appointments with the chiropractor. And physically, that helped me a lot. You know, he realigned my bones in such a way.
Which
you know,
had a bit of a battering over the years.
I think, yeah, I did. And my nervous system wasn't functioning properly, as you know, with Emmy. You know, that doesn't quite happen really. So he, I think, allowed things and tried to invite my body to sort of to heal itself really in that way. And I think I needed that in particular because of all this physical stuff I was doing. But in general, I would definitely advise that was a good move to make as well, because it's a physical thing. And all of a sudden I started to feel a bit better as well in myself, because you know, if your body's working properly and if things aren't obstructed, you know, there aren't any blockages in your nervous system, then, you know, your brain can get the message through to your body, can't it?
Totally. And I think it's great, you know, for everyone, the kind of formula's different, but when you find the pieces that you need, exactly, and it sounds like on the psychology side, really seeing that achiever pattern and that helper pattern were pretty fundamental for you, and then learning to calm your system down. And it sounds like some nutritional work was in your case less important, but also had its kind of role. Bit less, but also the chiropractic side again, especially given the physicality of what you've been doing.
Definitely.
As you were starting to notice that things were improving and you could see that there was kind of you were getting on the right track, I'm wondering how it was, because often that challenge, it's like the initial challenge is learning to really stop and rest and to stop fighting to accept where we are. But there's kind of another challenge that starts to come in where we can see we're making progress, and then it's like it's not, I just can't do anything. It's like I can do some things, but I'm not quite sure how much I can do. I wonder how that was kind of navigating that stage with that achiever pattern of like, well, maybe I can just start practicing, you know, the kind of that pressure kind of coming back in.
I can laugh about it now, but gosh, it wasn't funny at the time. It was really, I mean, I've
got images of you kind of going, oh, I can walk around the house, right? I'll do an hour's practice, kind of thing.
Totally.
And then in bed for a week afterwards. I don't know if I'm right or not, but that kind of sense of too quickly wanting to come back.
I did, and I think I probably did come back a little bit quickly. I'm a little bit impatient generally.
I hadn't got that from what you said so far.
But I'm working on it. But that's just, I don't know. It's just the way I'm built, I guess. But I mean,
but I guess you also you learnt to listen in a sense, because you had no choice.
That was the key. All of a sudden, the penny dropped, and you know, the key was listening to my body. And I did actually do it gradually at the beginning, because I didn't go back to playing the harp straight away. And I know if I went there and sat for long hours, then I'd obviously go backwards. So, and I desperately that, but there was a long.
How long was the period of time that you weren't really playing for?
Probably a good few months, and that's a long time in a musician's life, because you know, forever. You know, when you're playing every day.
Sure.
You know, it was just too much to be able to hold my arms up. I was just too tired around my shoulders, and
how long from doing concerts and kind of performing?
So I remember going back to there was a couple of really quite high profile concerts I'd committed to about a year before. And they were probably one of the biggest ones I really wanted to do. And I figured out, you know, there were quite a few I wasn't able to do, obviously, over that time. But when it got to maybe about month 5, maybe, or something like that, there was a couple of really high profile ones, and I felt, I think it'll upset me more not to do it. And I thought, okay, I think I'm going to commit to doing it, and I'm going to go through with it. But I'd given myself then all the support that I needed. Obviously, my family were all there. I made sure, of course, I had to rely on painkillers, which was awful and horrible, and they had horrible side effects. Sure. I felt very dizzy and stuff, and sick and things. But I think it would have destroyed me more not to do it at the time, because I just felt I really wanted to do it, and it was a big thing. I remember doing that a couple of concerts, and I just remember coming off stage and just crying my eyes off for about 2 hours because I was so exhausted. I'd been on stage, people didn't have a clue, didn't know, you know, and I was trying to smile and keep it all together, you know, which of course you do. But also, more than that, you know, getting back to playing your instrument, and there was an orchestra accompanying me, and it was live on TV, you know, there was a lot of different things like that going on.
And also, I imagine the pain of the thing that you love so much and not being able to just be free to do it. That's kind of this kind of black cloud kind of hanging around it.
Absolutely.
Although I know you've come to see it differently subsequently, but at that time.
Yeah, and not knowing how long it would last, you know, not knowing how badly I'd be like, you know, but I could see slight improvements, you know, coming along, and that really encouraged me. But then of course came the period of the tired and wired, and you know, kind of, and also the trial and error, you know, when it came to, you know, bouncing the boundaries really, and trying to find where my limit was. And oh my gosh, that stage felt like a long stage, even though I know, you know, compared to a lot of people, I suppose it was shorter, but I mean, it was about at least a year.
And that stage I think sometimes is more difficult than the kind of crash stage, because in the crash stage the focus is simply you have to rest, and okay, that's super challenging.
Yes.
But in the kind of stage where you're kind of coming through tired and wired towards what we call the reintegration stage, it's like you think you can do something, you do it, and you crash, and it's like there's that building of expectation and the disappointment that's just very difficult to live with, I think.
And the frustration as well, which then you realise actually that will make things worse if you get frustrated with yourself. Because
then you get frustrated at yourself for getting frustrated at yourself, which is even more frustrating.
Absolutely. So there's all these things going on, and particularly with concerts, it's not the type of thing you can kind of take it easy really. And the type of things I do usually are kind of about an hour and a half long of playing 2:45s.
But it's also all the rehearsals leading up to it as well.
So it's quite a demanding thing. So it was a job to know when was the right time. But also, I didn't really want to stay away from the stage too long because I was worried I would lose confidence. And, you know, obviously from a personal point of view, I felt if I stayed off, will I get back on?
No, I get it.
You know, it was a real big kind of learning curve. And I thought, will I ever get out of this? Because there were times where, you know, in that stage where, you know, I'd get to the end of a concert and I'd be exhausted. I'd be so tired. I remember there was one up in the north, and Chris had to literally carry me home, literally, you know, hold me. I couldn't walk because I was just too tired. I just couldn't give it any. And talking to people was difficult because I felt I was getting exhausted by it. You know, that's the biggest thing I love to do, is to speak to my audience, you know. So, you know, there came points where there was a lot of things like panic attacks and things that would happen. I'd really panic about it, and anxiety was
And I should say, I think probably not, because you're someone that historically had a background with anxiety, but it's just partly the nervous system is so kind of fragile in that state that you almost get biological anxiety. You probably know what I mean by that. It's like you're kind of like, why am I anxious? But there's no real energy, so your body's pumping adrenaline to compensate
to just
for that.
Get you through it. Yeah, absolutely. And there'd be days where I felt a bit better and I feel like I've got some energy. That's great. I can do it. And then of course you get carried away with it, and and then you empty the tank, and then you know, and you can, you know, there'd be times, you know, at the beginning at that stage sometimes it was maybe a week I'd be washed out for, or 2 weeks or whatever it was, and then that time would slowly I'd begin to be winning then in the end, because I was listening to my body. If I felt any pain, if I felt anything at all that wasn't right in my body, I would stop, even if I was in the middle of rehearsing or anything.
And that must have taken a huge amount of discipline, and I guess is the demonstration of the change that had happened, that you were valuing your body and your health more than this achiever kind of helper kind of pattern that was going on.
My attitude changed completely. I was such a go-getter before, and not that I'm not now, I still am, but I mean, but in a very different way.
You understand, you have to take care of yourself as well as everyone else.
And I've realised if my health and me are not first in life, everything else doesn't matter anyway. I'm not going to have anything else.
It's not sustainable without it.
Because I was so blinkered. I wasn't really thinking. And also it changed me completely. You know, I've realised there's more important things as well. I love that side of my life.
Yeah. But I was going to ask you about that. You know, when you, as you've kind of coming through the other side and you look back on, you know, your life as a teenager in your 20s and this whole journey that you've kind of gone through. And then, of course, those kind of few years, particularly with ME chronic fatigue. How do you see that now? Because of course at the time it was the worst thing that could have happened. I imagine it was awful, but I know that you have a different perspective on it now, and I think it's really inspiring people to hear about that.
Well, I think it's probably in a funny sort of way, the best thing that ever happened to me, really, even though it was an awful time in my life, and as it is for so many people. But actually, it really woke me up, and it really, really made me realize actually what is the most important thing in life, and what makes me happy, really. What actually makes me happy? Is it having a back-to-back schedule? Does that mean that I'm successful just because I've got a back-to-back schedule? No, it doesn't. It just, what I do within my career can be paced, and it can be at a pace that I can cope with, really, and I'm in control. I don't have to allow things to overtake me, really. And fortunately at this point I can now choose to say yes or no to things, and not that I'm saying I couldn't before, but when you do tend to at the beginning.
You could in principle, but I think for you just felt you had to keep pushing yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And I myself completely through doing that, so I'm pleased to say, I of course it's always a journey. I think I don't think it's the type of thing.
It's a good name for an album, that, isn't it?
Well, isn't it? Funnily enough, well, that's why I called the album Journeys, because I've produced albums before that have been important and have done and done okay, in different ways. But I mean, this particular one, it's just been so personal, really, because throughout my journey, the yoga and the meditation and different things would help, but for me particularly, I listened to music when I was ill, because of obviously that's my passion.
It speaks to you, yeah.
And there were lots of different pieces I noticed that had different effects on my health. If I listened to something quite calm, quite slow, quite tuneful, it would really just chill me out and just make me think, I can sleep to this, or I can relax. And if I listen to something quite, I don't know, minor, or something quite really, fast-paced, I would maybe stress out a little bit more,
Sure.
And it was really weird to see that happen, but it does work, if you do listen to something that's a bit more appropriate for your stage. And so I thought, well, why don't I just record those bits that I thought were important to me? So I picked out all the songs that I felt were really, imperative and important to me. And so there's 2 or 3 like Ladies in Lavender and, Go to Sleep My Baby, which is a really famous Welsh song. Scarborough Fair's on there, but with a new twist. And then that represents that first stage of being ill, not being able to do anything. And then there's the latter stage, which is me now, which I'm a lot more full of life and vitality now, and things like Toss the Feathers is in there, which is very lively as well. I had the London Mozart Players accompanying me on it, and Chris, my husband, was a big part of it as well, because he's a composer and an arranger, and so he's arranged all of the album. He also arranged harp that we did before the last album, and
he also composed a piece.
He did, and that's actually quite a nice story, because it's called Bluestone, and I don't know if many of your viewers might know this, but there's in Pembrokeshire there's a very, very famous collection of stones, Bluestone, and it's very near to where I was born. Literally within about 2 miles there are some bluestone there. I was there actually last week, and these stones were taken to Stonehenge to form Stonehenge, and the myth is that they're very, very magical, and they actually could be healing stones. So when I was starting to feel slightly better, maybe a few months into the crash, we call it the crash, Chris would take me, he'd put me in the car, and he would take me for a little spin up behind my parents' house in Pembrokeshire to see the Preseli Mountains, and it's a gorgeous view, and then there's the Bluestones, which are there, so and we just talked about how the history of the stones and things, and thought, well, how amazing would it be just I told him, compose a piece about it. I'd love to have a piece that I could play about it. So it was lovely that he did that, and so we've recorded it and did a video of it, and you can see it all on all the various social networks, on Facebook and on the website.
We'll get that out in a minute.
So
and I just maybe as we kind of begin to come to the close, that David, our chairman, and I were lucky enough to be invited down to the recording of part of the album, which I have to say was a very cool experience.
Thank you.
But it was really fascinating as well, seeing you take care of being back in your kind of world of kind of work, but integrating what you've learned through the time you've been ill. Seeing your family supporting you, and also you mentioned you had before on a camera had a masseuse come down, and you were doing bits of meditation and yoga. So just tell us a little bit about that kind of integration, you know, and how you see yourself approaching life, kind of, you know, because life is a journey, you know, and of course, you know, I know you've come a long way in having recovered, and of course, life continues and the pressures start to mount again, and how you see yourself really honouring what you learned. You know, the time that you were on.
I think you learn through the feelings and what you experience with these techniques. The tools that you learn through the clinic and through various different things like yoga and meditation, I think that feeling sticks with you. The feeling of feeling, oh, actually, I feel quite good today now after that, and I feel quite well again. I think there's nothing more powerful than just feeling it and experiencing it. So through having done that quite a few times and sort of put my toolkit together, you know, and worked out what works for me quite well. The hardest task then is to be disciplined and use it every day. Yeah. And as you know,
especially when you haven't got the call of symptoms to be the thing to get you to do it.
Precisely.
It's like initially when we still have symptoms, we're much more mindful, and then maybe I am superhuman again. That's where it takes more discipline than it does before that.
Absolutely. So that's what I found challenging, was just making sure I make time in the day to put these things into action, because
to put you first.
And it quickly catches up with you if you don't. So I've already gone through that bit, and so when it came to I actually debated whether I would be able to record. It's a really experience, and you know, someone like me will put like pressure on yourself to kind of be pretty good when you get to that stage. I want it to be good enough to live with, really, for the rest of my life, and I take it really seriously, and so but there was nothing better. I don't regret any of it. It was such an amazing time to get back together with the same team of people that recorded my last album, and but we approached it differently, as you said. I put things in place, like, you know, somebody to come and give me a little bit of TLC in the middle, you know, massage my body, because it's such a physical experience. I had to sit by the harp for, I think, 9 hours, I think was the first day, which is huge compared to where I've come from. And I knew I was putting my body through it, you know. So I can't do that every day now. Don't get me wrong. I don't sit there for
many people can, right?
No, absolutely not. It's just the nature of recording. You have to do it within a certain time. And also, you know, preparing myself mentally for it was the other thing, because there's a huge amount of concentration, as you can imagine, to redo things all the time. You need about 4 or 5 takes of the same piece, you know. So it's quite challenging. So I think I felt like I got on top of the recording before, but that was the other thing. My body remembered what it was like before to do it, and it's quite a stressful experience, and I find myself talking about the recording and I get quite stressed. So that was the other thing, to sort of let my body know that was in the past, and this was a new experience.
You're different, and it's different.
And it's going to be fine, and it will be fine. And, you know, it's just reiterating, giving myself the positive sort of chat in the shower every morning.
A little pep talk to yourself.
That's my place that I would check in with myself most of the time, you know. And so when it came to things like the photo shoot then and different things like that, that was a different ask for my body, you know, things, you know, cropped up that I didn't expect to feel, really, tiredness and different things. So, you know, you still go through these little things, but it's not obviously anywhere near where it was there. You know, I'm fully recovered now, but I obviously use the tools a lot to get me through.
And you're having to face being a human being rather than a superhuman being, which comes with its own challenges, doesn't it?
Absolutely, I completely agree. But, you know, I'm still asking quite a lot of myself this year. There's quite a lot of things going on, not just the release of the album, but we've got some tours in China and in America later on in the year. And where the album will be released as well. But, you know, I've done it in a far more sensible way this time. There is time after I get back to get over the trip. And I've scheduled in enough breaks that there's time for me just to have some downtime really in between. And I just think that's the biggest piece of advice really, is to just listen to your body, and, you know,
you just answering my last question, which was that what would you to that you that was maybe just, you know, had that seizure and just kind of coming into what was the beginnings of this journey, what you would say to that you?
I think the first thing I'd say is put yourself first. Definitely, you have to listen to your body and put yourself first. And secondly is be very aware. Just be very aware of thoughts that are running, you know, and your beliefs and your attitude and your thinking of life, really, the way you're wired as such, you know. Obviously, it's been very clear the way I've gone about it, but, you know, I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, I'm not regretting anything. I mean, at the end of the day, some amazing things have happened, and I'm really, truly grateful for that. And I could never change anything in that way. But I'm now looking at things with clear vision, and thinking this is a new chapter. And I've now completely started from afresh. And it's up to me now how life goes from now on. And it's up to me to decide and make those choices where I need to make things, you know, as easy as possible for me to be able to carry out a long and sustainable career.
Yeah, beautiful. Beautiful. So if people want to find out more, they can go to clairejones.co.uk.
Yeah.
And I know on there you've got kind of concerts. People can find out how to order the album through the various different kind of places.
And it's worth saying as well, if you just sign up on the website, you can get a free download of a track that's on there, because it's on pre-order at the moment, and it comes out on Sunday. But if you do feel, you know, just about well enough to come to the concert, it's on March the 5th in St John's Smith Square.
Yeah.
And I'll be playing 5 tracks from the new album Journey, and then I'll also be doing the Mozart Flute and Harp Concerto. So it'll be a balanced programme, and the proceeds will be going towards the Optimum Health Clinic. So
which we hugely appreciate. And I should say that if people do come down as well, we'd also love to see them, because a bunch of us obviously coming down as well. And we're really
I've got to say as well, I must thank the clinic from the bottom of my heart. You've been amazing, and you know, I couldn't have got there without you, really. And so it's just really important that everybody who listens, you know, just sticks with it and just believe in it, and keep listening to everything you have to say, because it really, really does work.
Thanks, Claire. I really appreciate it. Great. And thank you for your time as well. I know you're super busy with somewhat more high-profile press, so I really appreciate you coming down and making the time for us. I really do. So thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
You.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's Feel Good Friday. We're still kind of experimenting with the Friday sessions, and I'm still really keen to do some kind of mini breakthrough moments that are fresh as they're happening. And I know that people are a little bit shy sometimes of sharing their stories when they kind of become a little more kind of vulnerable and kind of open and happening. But if you've had a recent insight or breakthrough or kind of realization that's happened, please do reach out to us. You can email jenny@theoptimumhealthclinic.com, and we'd love to book something in. On Monday, it's Mindful Monday, and I'm going to be doing another guided meditation, and it's going to be a meditation to help cultivate and support more compassion. I look forward to talking with you then.